Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our event. So, a radical overhaul of the EU's long-term funding, just as governments face crippling budget crunches, gas and power prices that remain twice as high as pre-war levels, rising pressure from Donald Trump to buy immense volumes of oil and gas, and murky shadow fleet vessels threatening to cut critical power cables deep underwater. These are just some of the challenges facing the bloc today, with time running out to tackle them. And as the EU races to address these problems, it must now place energy security and realpolitik firmly at the heart of its policy making, all while reconciling those new priorities with its role as a traditional global climate standard bearer. Now, it's time to delve into some of these issues with our next All-Star panel. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Sigrid Friis, MEP, Danish MEP, Renew, member of the ITRE committee. Hello.
Pleased to be here.
And Albéric Mongrenier, Executive Director of the European Initiative for Energy Security.
Hi, how you doing?
Welcome both. Please. So, Sigrid, I'd like to start with you. We've just had the Commissioner on stage. So we've heard him defend his record on tackling energy prices, but also saying, to some extent, Draghi may be right. We haven't gone quite far enough in some ways. I mean, how would you assess his success so far in bringing down energy prices, and how much time do you think we have to fix this?
I really think that the Commission and the Commissioner Dan Jørgensen has set the right direction, but I'm really concerned about the pace. Because as you rightly just explained to us, the time to tackle these crises, both in terms of prices, in terms of energy security, in terms of the competitiveness position of Europe versus the rest of the world, and of course the green transition, the climate that we're all concerned about, then time is ticking, and I'm really afraid that if we don't move fast, we're going to be too late.
Absolutely. And Albéric, I'd like to bring you in here. I mean, the Commissioner has now given a few hints about what might pop up in the grids package next month. But I'm interested in getting your take as well. I mean, what would you like to see included in that package?
Well, I think we all know what's coming in there. Sorry.
Do we? I'd love to know.
I mean, more or less. But the thing is, there's only so much more that the Commission can do, right? I mean, there's a lot that has been tabled, and at the end of the day, it needs to trickle down. There's already many things that we've been trying to implement for the past, 10 years. Third energy package, etc., still not being implemented. So at the end of the day, what's very important is, for instance, permitting. And permitting, it's a national competency in many cases. The Commission can push very hard in one direction, and we see that at the political level, but it needs to trickle down at the national level. And at the national level, it needs to, it needs some backup. It needs some dynamic at the political level. It also needs to trickle down the administration. And so you don't really see that. You don't really see that sense of urgency. So we always come back to the previous panel was about speed. We keep saying we don't have time, we don't have time, we don't have time, but we keep repeating we don't have time. I think politically, we know what we're supposed to do, but we're just not doing it, And so I just feel like we're all saying the same thing all the time, and so it becomes a little bit boring. And to make it a little bit less boring, just maybe just quote like one quote from a book, an Italian novel called The Leopard. That's the quote is often referred to as the Lampedusa principle, and it says, for everything to stay the same, everything needs to change. And so originally, what the quote means is, basically, if you don't want to change anything, you just do some small cosmetic changes, and everything will, stay the same. You just do that to accommodate revolutionary forces. But what really needs to happen now is the opposite. So you actually need to read this quote differently. So for everything to remain the same, meaning if you want to, maintain democracy in Europe, if you want to maintain economic growth, if you want to stay relevant on the global stage, everything needs to change, and the way we do things needs to change. That means that the administration, not just the political power has to grab this issue of energy permitting, building energy sovereignty, whatever you call it, and really give the impetus to the administration here in Brussels, but also the national level.
I think it's a really interesting point that you're touching on. I mean, so far from the Commission and the previous Commission, we've had a kind of multitude of soft initiatives. We had the solar action plan, we had the wind power action plan, we had the grids action plan. But the problem is enforcing these plans becomes difficult when member states refuse to implement them. We've still had slow permitting times and problems with project auctions that certain clean tech sectors like wind complain about. So, I mean, what should the Commission and what can the European Parliament also do to ensure that member states actually enforce those rules?
Well, I find it so interesting how it almost seems that what it took for Europe to act, and I'm both talking about the Commission but also the member states as well, seems to be this geopolitical shock of having a little orange man in the White House. And why does it take a geopolitical shock like that to get us to move here in Europe? We're actually talking about something that we have known for decades, that the key to both the green transition, the energy security, the competitiveness agenda, it goes hand in hand with the energy policies that we are building on this continent. I mean, for example, for the Commission to put forward a proposal to ban Russian LNG imports by the end of 2026, so next year, this step has come only after pressure from the external actors. But Europe shouldn't need to be pushed from the outside to act in defense of what should be our own interests and values. And that's something I think is very important regarding the relationships between us in the European Parliament, the Commission, and of course the member state that holds the key to actually unlocking the potential that we have here.
Interesting. And I mean, obviously the grids package is not the only initiative in the pipeline. Next year, we're going to have an overhaul of the so-called governance regulation, right, which kind of regulates security of supply risks within the EU. I know some countries have pushed for unified security of supply rules because we have currently separate ones for electricity and gas. I mean, what do you think of such an idea? And, you know, what else should the Commission be thinking of when it's drafting this initiative?
I think what's important to keep in mind when you're drafting initiatives like this is that a greener Europe is a safer Europe, and a greener Europe is also a stronger Europe. We cannot build a resilient or innovative economy if we keep depending on these very volatile fossil fuel imports from, let's be honest, really unreliable suppliers. I think a great example could also be the electrification rate. Here in Europe, it's stagnated around 23%. But China has recently overtaken us at 28%. So a way to accelerate and to drive this innovation forward and this direction could be to not just set a climate target, but to also put, for example, a binding electrification target for 2040, and to put this in an electrification directive to actually have us go hand in hand with pushing this agenda forward, and to push both member state and industry. It's in everyone's best interest.
Interesting. And Alberic, I mean, what do you make of this idea to have an electrification target set in stone? Do we need more targets? Do we need more implementation instead of existing targets? And do you have other ideas for the governance regulation?
No, I mean, targets are nice. You need a North Star, but I think we have a North Star already. Target for electrification, I'm not against, but at the end of the day, is it going to really make us go faster in that direction? I'm not so sure. Right now, we've got two main problems that are linked to each other. The first problem is political willingness. I touched upon it, and the second is money, right? And so, all of these investments, I agree with you, they are essential for, for European energy security, to reach our energy transition targets, etc. It's all linked together, but we don't want to pay the price. The people don't want to pay the price. National politicians don't want to pay the price. We're seeing good things in the next European budget. There's some money that's going towards the right things, but that's only, it's peanuts compared to what you need to invest. We all know that. There's always the big figure that everyone mentions. I don't remember, 600 billion or something that's needed in grids, and another 100 billions there and there. I think we'll go back to the financial sector. At the end of the day, okay, you need the capital markets union that we've also been talking about for many years. Again, a problem of political willingness. But I think for the energy sector, what's really important is putting a value on resilience. You need to be able to monetize resilience, because it's a lot of upfront capex investments that are not happening because simply because it's too expensive, because we don't quantify the chaos that can ensue, 10, 15 years down the line because of, I don't know, hybrid attacks, or because, we don't have the data, we don't have the demand, the supply that we need to meet demand coming from, industry, from the defense sector, from the space sector, AI, etc. So we need to be able to quantify this, I think, in order to, to understand how much we're missing on if we don't make these investments right now. And then, on top of that, the bill also becomes much higher because, well, we're in a state of, we're at war, not just economic war, we're at war with Russia. It's quite obvious. Hybrid attacks on infrastructure are increasing. cyber, physical, etc. All of this has a cost. You need to build in resilience. You need to build in security into this infrastructure. That's going to increase costs. So again, who's going to pay? That's always the question. You need to find a way to drive that at the European level. And I think that also goes through a lot. Commissioner Jorgensen was referring to earlier more centralized planning, more horizontal planning across member states, and also more solidarity on cost sharing. That's going to be very important, I think.
Interesting. And I guess staying on that topic, I mean, obviously energy security, as you've highlighted, is becoming increasingly important. I mean, just last week we reportedly, had, well, in very different ways. Obviously, we had the news that reportedly some oil and gas rigs in Denmark were targeted by drones. It's unclear who sent the drones so far, but some politicians are saying that it's definitely Russia behind these. Obviously, NATO has launched its Baltic Sentry program to try and protect critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea region. What else could the EU do to, I guess, improve its joint work with NATO? I mean, do you see avenues of cooperation there?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots that's happening. Obviously, over the past couple of years, EU-NATO cooperation has increased quite a bit on this front, especially on infrastructure security. So I think NATO and EU see more and more eye to eye on this. But yeah, at the end of the day, well, obviously, there's only so much that NATO itself can do, on protecting the infrastructure. So indeed, it's more for the EU, I think, on the civilian side, to work closely with the private sector to incentivize this kind of, sort of security resilient by design investments. That where you actually incorporate from the design, from the construction of infrastructure or the upgrade of existing infrastructure, the equipment that will allow to deal with this, with hybrid threats.
Interesting. And I know one idea that Lithuania has sort of brought forward or thought of in recent months has been to earmark part of the Connecting Europe facility, so the energy cash pot for the EU, towards protecting energy infrastructure, critical energy infrastructure. Do you see that as a sensible idea as kind of negotiations around that kick off in earnest?
Well, I think it draws back to what you also touched upon about putting a price on resilience and being ready to invest in our own resilience. So if you want to have a better protection of our energy infrastructure, there is new technologies emerging also in terms of grid infrastructure that has smarter cables or better protected against outside interference. These things, we should be ready to invest in our own energy security, and we should be able to actually pay the price for resilience. And I think when we're debating whether or not we're ready to pay the price up front, because it always comes down to who's going to pick up the bill, I wish that we would also sometimes, as decision makers, be better at saying that the price of not acting is also really, really high. Right now, status quo shouldn't be an option because we can see what our energy dependency towards Russian gas has brought us into the situation that we're in today. And I would be really, really careful that we're not just switching from one dependency to another, meaning that we just switch out the Russian LNG with American LNG instead. I think this is a real opportunity for Europe to stand more on our own feet and to make sure that we have a diversified mix of energy. So that also means that every country can contribute in different ways, but to build a resilient system is also to build a diversified and very well-connected energy system. I think every decision maker should keep that in mind.
But on the Lithuanian idea, that makes sense to you?
I think there's some idea to that, yes.
Okay, interesting. And let's move on to nuclear as well. I mean, we've discussed the potential joint target between renewables and nuclear with the commissioner just now. He didn't seem to be budging very much on that as a potential idea. I mean, do you feel like the commissioner's being a little bit too dogmatic when it comes to his stance on that joint target, given this increasing opening that we're seeing from countries like Germany? Even this week, reportedly, the European Investment Bank is considering also funding nuclear for the first time. What do you think, Sigrid?
If I think he's being too hesitant or if he's being too open-minded?
If he's being a bit too dogmatic in his rejection of a joint target.
Well, I think that's a very maybe Danish approach to have that in mind. I see it like this. As as I said before, I think it's very important to have a diversified mix of energy, and I think it's important that every country contributes with what sort of energy production suits the energy systems that's already been built or been invested into, because I don't think it should be a goal for Europe that we all produce the same types of energy, rather the opposite, that some things we do very well in Denmark, for example, wind, and some things they do very well elsewhere, for example, nuclear. So I think the dogmatic view of the commissioner is probably his Danish baggage.
And Alberic, another, I guess, aspect or topic that the commissioner didn't seem to be budging very much on was the methane regulation. I mean, obviously we're relying on the US more and more when it comes to LNG, for example. Firstly, I'd like to hear your view on whether or not there's any risk of betting so much on US energy imports in the coming years. And secondly, do you feel like there should be some discussion around potentially reopening the methane regulation if we're to make that happen?
Yeah, I would have been more comfortable with the nuclear question as a Frenchman. But, no, I mean, so I'm not an expert on the methane regulation, but I mean, to what Commissioner Jorgensen said earlier, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that without U.S. LNG, we would not be able to be off Russian gas almost entirely, and I think we'll still need U.S. LNG for quite a while in order for us to remain independent from Russian gas. That has to be acknowledged. That said, obviously, my agenda as someone who worked for the European Initiative for Energy Security is European energy sovereignty, European energy independence. Okay, 100% independence is not possible, but we have to bank on on domestic energy as much as possible, again, to meet our industrial needs, AI, etc. In the US, they call that the energy dominance agenda. We can call that whatever we want, energy sovereignty, but we need to acknowledge that demand's going to grow, and we're going to need everything, so including nuclear, to meet this demand. So yeah, I mean, you don't want to replace a dependency with another. The same way, you don't want to become, over-dependent on China for critical minerals and all the components that you put in your grids, because there are clear security issues. I think with the US, you're dealing with something very different. You're dealing with market actors. You're dealing with a country that is democracy, and where there's freedom of enterprise, and where there's these individual LNG companies are not. They don't belong to the Central Communist Party or something like that. So I think we have to. You need to compare apples and apples. Here it's apples and oranges, really. So I see personally the US as still as a long-term partner. We have our differences, but there's areas of collaboration, and especially when it comes to trying to end the war in Ukraine. I think right now there's a potential opening. So you didn't ask me a question on that, but very, very quickly on sanctions. I think there's an option on the table to basically dry out Russian oil and gas exports, and that's not going to be done through drying out exports to Europe, because we're a very small portion of Russian oil and gas exports today. But I think that's something that European politicians are seriously considering, and that we need to try to work with the US on.
Interesting. And I mean, I'm glad you've touched on Russian oil and gas, because that was going to be my next question to you, Sigrid. I mean, MEPs yesterday have provisionally settled on their rough position when it comes to the Russian gas ban. I'm interested in your view. We're now heading towards interinstitutional negotiations in the coming sort of months or so, once the Council also settles on its position. I mean, what do you sort of predict that the biggest difference or tension between the Parliament and countries will be in those negotiations?
So I'm really excited to see how everything unfolds in the following time. This is a policy topic that's quite close to my heart. I used to work with this on a local level back in Denmark before I became an MEP. How can we push natural gas out of the district heating systems or the household heating systems in Denmark by using district heating as a force? I predict that when you want to put together so many different energy systems that the European member states consist of, that's of course going to give some difficulties in terms of how fast can we go go, and which measures can we use, and how hard are we ready to push from a Brussels side, and how much to leave to the local initiative, and how can we make sure that we keep the close connection to the local and regional decision-making level. I think that's also going to be one of the struggles that that we are facing as policymakers, is in our eager to be maybe more efficient, more fast-paced, that we might risk to lack the connection to the local and regional level. And I think that's very important if you want to stay connected to the citizens, which I think is what European policies should be all about. So that's something I'll be following very closely.
Interesting. And I know previously the Parliament has pushed quite hard to include Russian oil within the gas ban, and also accelerate that ban by a year, so by the end of 2026, if I remember correctly. Is that still something that you're going to try and push for, you think, in negotiations?
Definitely. Both the question of oil is interesting, and also, of course, as we've begun this debate on timing and how hard to push deadlines, also, of course, going to be one of the cornerstones of this debate, and try to find common ground on that question.
Interesting. And Alberic, I mean, do you see any gaps in the legislation as it stands today that should be addressed? I mean, there's been, I guess, criticism from some quarters that the country's compromise proposals, negotiations, documents, etc., on the Russian gas ban have left perhaps several loopholes on the table when it comes to, for example, transiting gas, Russian gas from Turkey to the EU. Also the question of mixed LNG cargoes between, that have some part Russian, some part non-Russian, and it's quite difficult to identify which is what. I mean, what do you make of some of those loopholes, some of those gaps? Any ideas on how we should close them?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, for the beginning, it's very difficult to design these kind of measures. There's always going to be loopholes that one can, that one can use. The thing is, what is it that we're trying to achieve here? Are we trying to be off Russian gas symbolically, or are we really trying to, hurt them in a way that makes them unable to continue their war in Ukraine? And then coming back to my previous point, I think it's great what we've done. We should definitely continue pushing forward to get Russian oil and gas out of the European system as much as possible, including from Hungary and Slovakia. And I think on that front, the European Commission should step in and offer some guarantees. Coming back to the question that you asked to Commissioner Jorgensen earlier, I don't really buy the Croatian transit fee argument. I don't think that's a real valid reason. I don't think the transit fees are so high compared to stuff, the Croatian fees compared to the fees on oil and gas coming from Ukraine. But yeah, point is, what do we want to achieve? If you really want to, the main point is to dry out Russian oil and gas exports. And for that, you're going to need secondary sanctions. And for that, you're probably going to need to work with the United States, because Europe alone cannot, our sanctions, our bans don't have enough bite as of today. So you're going to need to, one way or another, try and get the US on our side on this. It's going to be complicated. There's a lot, again, coming back to what I was saying, an option has been tabled. There's a lot of, people are saying it's bluff, or it's just kicking the can down the road on the Trump administration side. Maybe, but we have to, seriously consider this option, sit at the table and see what can be done. At the European level, so I'm not an expert in terms of, which loopholes where, but yeah, definitely we can, again, coming back to what I said earlier, I think if we give some good guarantees to Hungary and Slovakia on, the European Commission stepping in one way or another to replace Russian oil and gas, we can actually, meet the ambitious targets that we've set for 2026, 2027.
Interesting. And perhaps last question to you, Sigrid. I mean, staying on that topic, I mean, obviously it's been very difficult to get Hungary and Slovakia on board with this piece of legislation that don't need to be on board because it's qualified majority, as we've highlighted. But now the EU is also bringing forward its own sanctions package. So it's going to ban LNG, wants to ban LNG by the end of 2026. I mean, reportedly, to get Hungary on board, the Commission is considering unfreezing 550 million euros in funding for Hungary. I mean, obviously, if I were sitting inside the Commission and making the calculations, we still pay something like 1.7 billion euros a month to Russia in terms of energy revenues. And so 550 million seems perhaps worthwhile. But is the Commission, in your view here, setting a dangerous precedent when it comes to essentially, just paying Hungary off every time it wants to get any piece of legislation passed, be it energy or more broadly?
Interesting question on the political strategy or the calculations of the Commission. I think for an area like this, there are so many great arguments on why we should free ourselves from the Russian gas, that we shouldn't need to be bribing or unfreezing funds to go down this road. Because this is, I mean, investing in our own secure and green energy is really like the political Swiss knife. It's a solution to so many problems all at once. It's about security, it's about autonomy, it's about competitiveness, it's about the price on the energy bill that the citizens pay every month. It's about the green transition. It's about ensuring a planet that we can pass on to the next generations. So with all of these great arguments in hand, maybe I'm just idealistic, you can call me that, but I think you shouldn't need to be pushing to unfreeze funds to go down the road, because all the political arguments, they should be there.
Absolutely. All right, well, I want to thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. Thank you for an insightful panel, and yeah, we'll be moving on there. Thank you very much.